story at church is the story for the kids or for the grown-ups? So we're going to have a children's story. Karen?
Do I need to stand behind this?
Yes, yeah, we got to hear you.
All right. Okay. So we're all children of God. And I find that when I do a children's story, it's not just the children that listen. Not just the little children that listen. So, I don't know, coming out here, some of you talk about, Greg talked about having property. I don't know, do any of you have chickens? Have any of you had any experience with chickens?
We just hatched out 5 at Cedarbrook, so we have little chickens.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you a story about chickens. First, I would like you to know that, we think sometimes chickens aren't very smart, and they run around. I don't know what, you hear all these things, birds of a feather flock together, and these kinds of things. And I find, having lived on a farm and having had chickens and ducks, dogs and cats, cows and horses, that there's a lot of reason for these sayings that we have. They have a basis in fact. And but I want to give you just a couple of little things to think about chickens. We know that they have about at least 30, their vocabulary, 30 different kinds of sounds and words and communications, and they're highly social. And they have different words, different things, different calls, meaning different things. And we know that if they have a different call. If there's a predator coming, they'll warn each other. There's a different call if the predator's from the sky, and a different response. Or if the predator is from the ground, like a snake, and a response. If the predator's from the sky, they're going to seek cover or flatten themselves. If the predator's from a snake, they're going to look and stand up. And where is it? And that call will tell them which way they should do. Did you know that? And they have many sounds that they make for their chicks. They have sounds for warning. They have sounds for, the mama says, this is food. This is food. She teaches them what food is. And she shows them. And then she has a sound that says, this is food, try it. Just kind of like we would say to our children when we give them food, try this. This is good. So this morning I'm going to tell you a story about a big old fat hen called Mrs. George that we had. She was a big Cocoomeran hen. Cocoomeran hens are black and white. Probably you've seen barred rocks, right? Do you know what those are? They're black and white. Well, Cocoomerans are similar. And so a big hen. She was a big hen. And she wanted to have babies, and so she took it upon herself to go, and we have roosters, so that's not a problem. And she took it upon herself to go broody, and she hid someplace, and then she brought her babies out. And hens are chickens. They're a lot of fun, actually. They love to garden with you. Love to garden. So when I get out and I'm weeding my flower beds or whatever, I always had chickens weeding with me because, I'm weeding and they know what happens when you turn up the soil, and they're out there scratching and they're looking for the worms, and when I would see a worm, I'd throw it out there, and they just are right around there with you. And so Mrs. George was used to the fact that I would weed. And I was out there one spring morning, and I was weeding along the side of my house. I was weeding a flower garden. And I had company. I had a big Newfoundland dog, 145 pounds, and I had 4 Australian Shepherd puppies of about 5 weeks old just gambling around me. And I had a 6-month-old tuxedo kitten who was playing with the 4 or 5 Australian Shepherd puppies. She was just about that same size, and I still have pictures of her leaping up in the air and twisting over the tops and the backs of these puppies and trying to pounce on them. And in the middle of this comes Mrs. George with her 4 chicks, and they were small, really, really small. And I'm thinking, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Why would you bring your 4 chicks over here where, I mean, how could I keep weeding? I'm looking to make sure that the Newfoundland, he's pretty much, I can leave and leave alone. But, one time when we were gone, he did kill 6 chickens. Not because he was prey driven, but because they were making noise and he thought probably they were a nice squeaker toy, because he didn't eat them and he didn't even bite through. He just, oh, squeaky, squeaky, squeaky. It was terrible. And so I know that this little chick is going to draw his attention. Well, what do you think the cat thought? Oh my goodness. She is sitting there and she is down there. You've seen cats. You know how they do. They get down there and they get really intense and they move their rear end and their tail is, and I'm going, oh, brother. How can I even I don't want to see these chicks get killed. And, Mrs. George seemed so oblivious to any danger at all. She let the chicks wander away from her 4 feet, 5 feet into all of this danger. I'm going, you are not a very smart mother. You are just not a very smart mother at all. And I was kind of disgusted at this because I wanted to get my weeding done. But instead, I'm just weeding, and then I'm looking, and I'm just trying to make sure. And the puppies, they hadn't seen, puppies, they're interested in everything that moves. So they wanted to chase them. Oh, brother. I was not real happy with Mrs. George, to say the least. So I kept weeding, and I kept keeping an eye out and just kept making sure that things were safe. And in the meantime, Mrs. George is talking and to her chicks, sort of, and she's scratching, and they're running here and there, all in the midst. I'm seeing in all of this. And finally, I got my wheelbarrow full of weeds, and I had to take it and empty it. And our compost heap is it's way out of sight of where I was weeding. It's down the driveway and into the pasture and behind some sheds. And I think, what is going to happen now when I leave? And so I'm wheelbarrowing along, and as I wheelbarrow along, I'm glancing back over my shoulder for fear of what is going to happen. But as I glanced back over my shoulder, and I got a little ways, maybe as far as the end pews down there, I noticed something. That mama hen had said something to those chicks, and they had run over and got underneath her wings. And there she sat with her wings all fluffed out, and she was about this big with all those, how they can fluff themselves and make themselves look really big. And she was just sitting there. I'm just sitting there in the sunshine. Don't have a care in the world. And I left her and I went and I emptied my wheelbarrow. And I was out of sight. And when I came back with a wheelbarrow, I came back and I set the empty wheelbarrow down. And I got down on my hands and knees and started weeding. And do you know what she did? she said something to those chicks, and they all went back out again and started playing in all of this with all the, well, they weren't playing. They were looking for things. They were discovering things. But the other animals were playing, and the big Newfoundland porter was lying there and kind of looking at them, and I said, "You leave them alone." And the puppies were gambling around, and Mama Hen didn't have a care in the world. And I thought to myself, how does she know? How does she know to trust me like that? How does she know? And I thought, she doesn't worry because she knows I'm trustworthy.
Thursday morning, I went for a bit of a hike, but hike is not quite the right word because when you hike, you're going from here to there. I'm a trail runner, and then it's really from here to there. You're making. Thursday, I was just wandering, meandering, moseying, uh, just kind of walking in the woods. The area where I was walking, there had been a freak windstorm, and a lot of trees were down. A lot of my walking, I was walking along logs because there was just so much stuff on the ground. That was the easiest path, and then climbing over and under other logs. It's a interesting area, and I've seen a number of these kind of places where a freak windstorm will take a small area of the forest there and just knock over a whole bunch of trees, and they have their roots up in the air. And at first, when I'd seen it from a distance, I thought maybe it was a thinning operation or maybe some logging. No, this hadn't been, no chainsaw had been there. This was just wind had knocked it over. But as I'm wandering through the woods there, and this devastation created by the wind, I noticed on the ground the orchids you were talking about, Greg, these calypso orchids. Little flowers about that tall. Pardon? No, they're not white. They are pink and purple. I'm not good with color names, but they're somewhere between pink and purple. And I stopped and took some pictures and admired them. And I remembered when I had first seen them several years ago on the other side of the valley. And that day I'd been trail running, and I was definitely not looking for flowers. I'm out trying to make miles. I'm training for a race, but these flowers, I had to stop. Stopped and took pictures so I could go and ask somebody, what are these things? At that time, I hadn't started learning flower names, so I just knew pretty flowers. And so I took them home and managed to find out they were calypso orchids. But then I had not seen them again for several years. And so Thursday morning, they stopped me. And I got down and I took some pictures, and they're just exquisitely lovely. And it reminded me of the text that we had today where Jesus says, consider the lilies of the field. And yes, these are not lilies, but the same idea, right? Yeah, close enough. And I got to thinking. So let's see, the translation that we read this morning said, Jesus, in there it says, observe the lilies. The one that I looked at and copied in my notes from the New Living Translation says, look at the lilies. But I like the King James word. Do you remember what it is? Yeah, consider, which to me means stop. Look at, spend a while with this thing. Let that lily talk to you. Consider the lily and how lovely it is. I laugh, Solomon, all his splendor. When I think of loveliness of attire, I don't think of Solomon. But what? Yeah, that's true. I never saw Solomon, but I've seen lots of people who are dressed lovely. I usually think of a lady with their beautiful dress. This morning, as Karen's walking out the door, I'm going, "Oh, that's pretty. I like that sweater. I like the yellow stripes." And no matter how beautiful a human created piece of fashion is, and we make beautiful things. So this is not I'm respecting it even as I'm saying, but nothing that we can make would be beyond the loveliness of one of these calypso orchids. They're just, and this time of the year, there's flowers everywhere. And Jesus says, consider the lilies. And what is the lesson in this passage right here? What is the lesson we are supposed to take from the lilies? Don't worry. And if you're like me, and if you take the words of Jesus as kind of authority, and he says, don't worry, and you're going, ooh, this is a daunting challenge. Yeah? Don't worry. Be like Mrs. George. When Mrs. George was there in the yard, were there dangers? Yes. Was she aware of them? Yes, she was aware of them. But she didn't worry, because when Karen was there, Karen was going to take care of the dogs, and when Karen was going to go, she then took prudent action. So she was not heedless. And obviously for us, we have to be wise in our engagement with life. We take precautions. We engage with life in a wise way. But Jesus says, don't worry. Don't waste your life worrying. You've got God in heaven who cares about you at least as much as he cares about flowers, at least as much as he does about crows. So if you are as good as a crow, then don't worry. Now, I'm going to stop right here for a second. Greg's already sort of tipped his hand. When we start talking about nature, immediately there's visions that come to your mind of loveliness. Not everything in nature is lovely. There's horrifying things. There's scary things. Your childhood fear of grizzlies is not altogether misplaced. But you have practiced eyes to see loveliness, and that's everywhere. So, talk to me. When you think of something lovely in the natural realm, what is a favorite loveliness in the natural realm for you? Pardon? Sunset. Oh, she's stealing my thunder here. Sunsets, yeah. Amazing. And it happens so often. Sometimes, I've heard people, and again, I'm not dismissive of this, they'll talk about a bucket list. I want to see that thing before I die. And it's something special. If you've never been to Grand Canyon, put it on your bucket list. You should go once, because it truly is grand. And thank you. There were some pictures there during the music of Grand Canyon, one with a rainbow in it. But there is so much loveliness that's close. Sunsets. Yeah. All right, somebody else. Eagle. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But do you have a lot of them around here? Oh, nice. When we first moved to our place, once in a great while we would see an eagle. Now, we see it, they've moved into the neighborhood, and so the dogs have to guard the chickens. Instead of eating the chickens, now the dog's job is to guard the chickens. All right, yeah, thank you. They are so grand to see them, especially when they come down low and they're so big. Somebody else. When you think of something in nature that's lovely. Rainbows are nice. Yes, they really are. I love rainbows. Somebody else. Her garden. Ah. So, is there a flower in your garden that is your pride and joy? I love peonies. Karen has a yellow peony that a bush that one of my daughters and I went in on halvesies to buy it. It was outrageously expensive, but we saw it at a nursery and we go, it was Mother's Day a few years ago. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Something in nature that's pardon? Mountains. And do you have some favorites?
Well, anyone I can get my feet on, pretty much. But sometimes just looking at them works too.
That's so true. Yes, I love it. Any of them you can get your feet on. Yes.
Jackson was pretty awesome. Right up there by Baker.
Yeah. And now you're stirring jealousy in my heart because I only know it from pictures. And for 25 years that we've lived here, I keep going, I've got to go see that mountain. So it's on my bucket list. In October. All right. Yeah. All right. Let's look at, go from Matthew, and let's go to Psalm 104. A lovely passage that celebrates God in creation. And I'm just going to read a little bit here from this psalm. We'll wander. We'll mosey through Psalm 104. Notice a few beautiful things along the way. Psalm 104. Let all that I am praise the Lord. O Lord my God, how great you are. You are robed with honor and majesty. You are dressed in a robe of light. You stretch out the starry curtain of the heavens. Did any of you guys see the northern lights? You did. Yeah, we had heard that they might be bright, and so Karen had gone to bed, and she said, wake me up if there's anything. And I stayed up for a while, and went outside at about 11 and came back in and said, wake up, honey. And we went out and spent a while outside, and then we have a young gal that rents from us, and she came in from some late date. She was headed in the house. We go, no, you can't go in yet, look. And then the three of us were spending a while out there watching the play of light in the sky. And then a friend of mine had gone camping that night, specifically to go see it. And so then they had black sky, because where we live, there's still too much light. Black sky with stars, and then the northern lights. You stretch out the starry curtain of the heavens. You lay out the rafters of your home in the rain clouds. You make the clouds your chariot, riding upon the wings of the wind. What a glorious picture. And this reminds me of the Midwest, Kansas, Nebraska, where you get these great thunderheads blowing through. And if they don't send a tornado your direction, they're grand to watch. Amazing, glorious picture of power in the sky. The winds are your messengers. Flames of fire are your servant. I'm wondering if this is flames of lightning fire. I don't know. You placed the world on its foundation so it could never be moved. You clothed the earth with floods of water, water that covered even the mountains. At your command, the water fled. At the sound of your thunder, it hurried away. Mountains rose and valleys sank to the levels you decreed. This is interesting because the place where I camp, I try to go camping once a week, and place where I went hiking. It's an area where the mountains have gone up And the valley has gone down, and you can actually see rock surfaces where they have slid past each other. And you have this something called slicken sides where the rocks have slid past each other. So the mountains rose up, the valleys sunk down. Okay, let's see, verse 10. You make springs of water pour into the ravines, so the streams gush down from the mountains. They provide water for all the animals, and the wild donkeys quench their thirst. Here there's water everywhere. You know, it seems like every valley, every ravine has water in it. But, you know, Psalms was written in the Middle East, which is more like the California desert. You know, it's not Sahara Desert, but it's a place where water is much scarcer, much rarer. And in places like that, water is magic. I remember one time going on a long, ill-advised hike by myself somewhere out in one of these desert places. And ended up being longer than I thought. I'd used up my water, and so, you know, I spent several hours as I'm hiking looking. What was I looking for? So, you know, it was an area of sagebrush and Joshua trees, and what I was looking for was a cottonwood. Because I knew if there was a cottonwood, there'd be water. Those Joshua trees, they were drinking, obviously, because that's how they stay alive. But there was no water for me where those Joshua trees were and where the sagebrush was. No, that wasn't going to help me out. And finally, in the distance, I saw the green. I said, wait a minute, that green, that's too bright. That's got to be cottonwoods. So I headed that direction. And sure enough, when I got there, out of a canyon wall, there was this gushing stream coming out of the canyon wall. Oh, that was a good drink, a really good drink. The birds nest beside the streams and sing among the branches of the trees. You send rain on the mountains from your heavenly home, and you fill the earth with the fruit of your labor. You cause grass to grow for the livestock and plants for people to use. I laugh. I grew up in the city, you know, downtown. Grass is something you had in your yard, and your yard was, well, in proportion to our house, it was about the size of this churchyard. You know, it's just this little bit of strip around a little bit of trim, right. Well, now we've lived on a farm for 25 years, and I look at grass entirely different. You know, our lawn starts to get high, and Karen is thinking, hey, we got to get out and mow the lawn. I'm thinking, don't waste grass on the lawnmower. We've got horses. They would like to eat this, you know. My view of grass, it has radically changed because I now, no, that's food. And every time I see long grass, I keep thinking, quick, somebody get a cow. There's some food over here that needs to be eaten, and then we don't have to waste time cutting it, waste energy cutting it. You cause grass to grow for the livestock and plants for people to use. You allow them to produce food from the earth, wine to make them glad, olive oil to soothe their skin, and bread to give them strength. The trees of the Lord are well cared for, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. There the birds make their nests, and the storks make their homes in the cypresses. High in the mountains live the wild goats. Well, here in the Olympic Mountains. Wait a minute, did they get rid of all the goats from the Olympics?
There are a few that hide out up there, but most of them are.
Okay. Well, out where we are, I guess the goats are native. So in fact, yes, they were bringing them from here to there. And so, yeah, if you go to the right neighborhoods in the mountains east of our house, you'll almost always see the wild goats. Yep. And then it talks about the hyraxes, which I think is like a marmot. Yeah, we got lots of marmots and pikas to talk to us when we go hiking. You made the moon to mark the seasons, and the sun knows when to set. You send the darkness, and it becomes night, where all the animals come out to prowl about. Then the young lions roar for their prey. stalking the food provided by God. At dawn, they slink back into their dens to rest. Then people go off to their work, where they labor until evening. O Lord, what a variety of things you have made. In wisdom, you have made them all. Yeah, the Bible writers looked at the bounty of nature, the beautiful things in nature, and immediately looked beyond that to the Creator. You know, the bread that they were eating, the wheat that was growing in their field was the gift of God. And Jesus echoes that when he says, hey, consider the lilies. Look at them and learn from them. Watch the birds and learn from them. Now, it's important that we note nature does not speak with a single voice. You know, the neighborhood where my orchids were growing had been devastated by a storm. And they were growing on top of the ground under them was the surface of a landslide or rock slide that had come off the cliffs over that direction. And then on top of the rock slide was volcanic ash that had come from from Crater Lake, Mount Mazama, how many hundreds of miles away. Huge catastrophes, that had, so there was disruption of life, yes. But the Bible writers call us back and say, here's what I want you to see when you see the loveliness in nature. Let that speak to you of God. Let the lilies talk to you of God. Don't focus your attention on the uprooted trees. That is also true. But where is your attention? On the beauty. And for us in our ordinary workaday world, the human world, it's sort of like the natural world. I have friends that every time they talk to me, immediately they begin to talk about their anxiety, the bad things going on in the world. Are there bad things going on in the world? Yeah. And I keep thinking, but why specialize in that? That's a good word. Let's not. We can't see everything. I remember listening to an interview with a guy who'd written a book about smells. And he talked about this whole adventure where he had, when you start digging into these worlds, the world of smell, flowers and food and seasonings, and at some point, he was talking about how he'd gone to this place and the people who, they had specialized, they had cultivated their sense of smell so they could distinguish different things. Think about what a dog can smell, And so then he said, and so somehow he came away and says, so what we need to do is pay attention to everything. And I laughed. I'm going, can't do it. No, stop it. You can't pay attention to everything. Now, what he was saying is there's things to notice that maybe we haven't noticed, sure. But you cannot pay attention to everything. So what are we going to pay attention to? Are we going to let the lilies talk to us and the orchids? Or is our vision going to be dominated by the uprooted trees? Both are true. But one is going to feed our soul. Because, and now I'm going to, this may not be a logical progression, but nobody's ever accused me of being excessively logical, so. I want to go look at the other way that Jesus uses the bounty of nature. And now let's go to Matthew 5. And I don't have the direct quotes here, so I'm just going to, but I think you'll know these words, and reading along you can correct me. But all down, I don't know, about 35 or 38, something like that. Jesus says, don't just love your friends. I want you to love your enemies. Do you see that? And then why are we supposed to love our enemies? What business do we have loving our enemies? Jesus says, well, because you are children of God, and God is so generous, he sends his rain on the just and even on the unjust. He's not picky. He sends his sunshine on the righteous and on the wicked. And you think, wow, what is it? And Jesus says, so I want you to be like that. God is indiscriminately generous. And we are the children of God. So we are invited to practice indiscriminate generosity. How often do we ask, does that person deserve that? And there's a place to ask that. I mean, I don't want to be, but we need to be careful with that. Because the picture here in the Sermon on the Mount, at the heart of the teaching of Jesus, is a call for, trust God, because God is generous. And then Jesus says, oh, and by the way, you be the one that Mrs. George can trust. You become the generosity of God in the world. You model in the place where you are the loveliness that you have received from God by considering the lilies, by giving your attention to this beauty, this loveliness that is available to us and is the gift of God. When I got out of seminary, I was pretty smart. I was a superlative student, and I was full of the knowledge of historical theology, and the way various theological controversies over thousands of years of Christian history, and I paid a lot of attention to that stuff. So I came out and came to my first church, the Babylon Seventh-day Adventist Church on Long Island, New York. And so I was eager to get up in the pulpit and tell these people all the stuff I had learned out of all these books. I knew Greek and Hebrew and touched a little Latin. Man, I was full of stuff. I mean, at seminary they pumped it in, and I was drinking out of that fire hose, and I was just ready to spread all my knowledge. And it didn't take a long time. I mean, it wasn't day one. It took a little while, but didn't take too long when I began to realize that these people that I was talking to, the people I was instructing, I knew about God because I'd read a bunch of books. They knew God. They'd actually known him longer than I'd been alive. They'd been doing church longer than I'd been alive. And so after a year or two there, I realized that maybe my main job in that church was to get educated. And they were a wonderful bunch of people who were gentle with me. It wasn't their first time, and they were masters, and really they did a wonderful job. I tell people, if I learned to be a pastor, it was from the saints in Babylon. They were a wonderful bunch of people. And over the years, I moved deeper and deeper into this. Well, now when I talk to young pastors, I tell them, so if you stand up in church and you tell the church something that 98% of those people don't already know, It's either heresy or it's not terribly important. And what we do here in the front, I mean, you're going to preach. Yeah. So I've said, hey, trust God and be generous like God. And I know a bunch of you are going, what? I never heard of that before, right? No. I'm speaking our faith, right? You know, that's part of why we come to church, is to give voice to our faith, to cultivate it, to nourish it together. And, you know, I can't sing, so I preach, but I'm doing really the same thing that the song does. You know, the music is helping us to give voice to our faith, and as we give voice to it, it sinks deep. As the branches go up, the roots go deeper. So, you know, I end by, you know, coming back to the words of Jesus and saying, this week, especially here at springtime, consider the lilies and the azaleas and the rhodies and the lilacs and the tulips. And thank you. You know, I'm getting old, folks. The peonies. Let's let the flowers talk to us and fill us, and then flow through us so that we too become flowers in the garden of God.
And I firmly believe that as you're there looking at the lilies and enjoying the beauty of the flowers, that's a place where you're near the heart of God, the creator of those lilies. Join me as we sing. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest, near to the heart of God. Oh, Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us who wait before thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of comfort sweet, near to the heart of God, a place where we our Savior meet, near to the heart of God. Oh, Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us who wait before you, near to the heart of God. There is a place of full release, near to the heart of God, a place where all is joy and peace, near to the heart of God. Oh, Jesus, blessed Redeemer, sent from the heart of God, hold us who wait before thee, near to the heart of God.
Let's pray. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen.